Hey Indian Creek 8th grade students, it's Professor Blazek. I'm back, and today I want to talk to you about creative writing, some tips and some strategies that you can use in getting ready to start working on your journals for second quarter, which is the short stories that you've been coming up with in class. So let's jump right in. Let's talk first about formatting. So your short story is going to include a large number of paragraphs, a lot more than the essays that you've been writing. Those of you obviously who will know that when you read a book, there's just a ton of paragraphs because there's a lot of different things going on. There's a lot of changes in the focus as far as who's talking, what's happening, the action, and so there's going to be a lot of paragraphs in your short story. These paragraphs should be a variety of lengths and styles, but each one should maintain a single focus. So if you're going to start talking about a new action, a new topic, if someone new starts speaking, you need to create a new paragraph. So for example, if you're writing dialogue, which is your characters speaking, these paragraphs are often going to be shorter because your characters aren't just going to be rambling on, they're going to be talking, going back and forth. So again, each paragraph is going to be a different character who is speaking, because you don't want to have one paragraph where there's 2 or 3 characters talking just back and forth. It gets really difficult for your reader to follow, and it's just better to break up your dialogue. Now, on the other hand, if you're giving description, so if you're describing the setting, if you're giving things for characterization, these paragraphs can often be longer because description can take a lot more words, obviously, than just dialogue. So it's important to try and strike a balance between character speaking and then your description, just to keep the flow going, to keep your reader from getting bored from reading the same types of paragraphs for too long of a time. So for example, here's a paragraph from Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. If you read through it, you can see that it's one long paragraph, and it is used to set the scene of a wand shop that Harry has walked in just when he's first getting used to the wizarding world, and he's going to buy his first wand. So because it's focusing on the setting and Harry's reaction to the shop, there's no dialogue going on. It's one longer paragraph because it keeps that one focus the whole time. Now, if we look at another example from the same book, this is a much more dialogue-driven section. You can see that there are multiple characters speaking. There are small bits of description included, such as the character's reaction to the speech, their emotions, and so the focus is changing from one character speaking to another character speaking. So this is why multiple shorter paragraphs is what is used. So this is when you're going into write your short stories, this is how you should try to format when characters are speaking versus when you're giving a description. Now remember that each paragraph should be indented, which means you're hitting the tab key. And again, that any time a character is speaking, their words need to be in quotation marks to show, obviously, that they're speaking. And like the examples we just looked at from Harry Potter, descriptions can be spliced in with dialogue. You don't just have to have your characters talking back and forth with nothing else going on. This helps show your characters' moods or give other information that's going to propel the action and propel the plot. So you can mix and match as you're writing. Just remember, descriptions are going to tend to be longer paragraphs, and then dialogue, you want to focus mostly on what the characters are saying, but you can include little bits of description in there as well. So I want to look at some other writing tips, because writing in a creative way, doing creative writing, coming up with your own stories or poems or anything like that, is very different from writing an essay, because there's just a different aim in your writing, there's a different focus, and so there are some tips and tricks that I've included to hopefully help you become more comfortable in writing in a creative way, in telling a story. So one of my favorite authors, his name is Kurt Vonnegut, had 8 rules on writing short stories. Now, I'm not going to go through all 8, but I wanted to show and share with you some of the most helpful ones because I think that they will really give you some good solid support when you're writing. So the 4 rules that I've included are: every character should want something, even if it is only a glass of water. Every sentence must do one of 2 things: reveal character or advance the action. No matter how sweet and innocent your leading characters, make awful things happen to them in order that the reader may see what they are made of. And give your readers as much information as possible as soon as possible. To heck with suspense. Readers should have such complete understanding of what is going on, where, and why. So I wanted to include these tips from Vonnegut, and I want to look at a couple of them a little bit more in depth to help understand why these are important to think about when you're writing your stories. So the first tip from Vonnegut I want to look at is when he said, every character should want something, even if it is only a glass of water. Now, why is this important to keep in mind? It's because if you want your characters to seem realistic, if you want them to just jump off the page and just seem like real, true, alive characters, they have to have a purpose. They have to have something driving them to do whatever it is that they're doing. You know, that drive could be their hopes, their dreams, you know, for love, for revenge, but there has to be something driving them, because you all know in your own lives, the choices you make and the actions that you undertake, there's something driving you to do that. And so if there's no reason given for your characters to be acting the way that they are, it's really not going to make sense to a reader, and it's really going to take away from how good your story could potentially be. Now, another tip I want to look at that Vonnegut said was that every sentence must do one of 2 things: reveal character or advance the action. And why this is important is because if your story rambles on without the plot ever moving forward, you know, without anything ever really happening, it's going to be really easy for your reader to just get bored and lose interest in your story. You know, your stories are going to be short, so you don't want to waste too much time giving unnecessary descriptions. You want to focus first and foremost on the plot, and then add description when needed. You know, I'm not saying that description should not be given at all, but only include what is necessary and leave out whatever you don't need. Now, some additional writing tips in addition to the ones that Vonnegut gave us. One thing to think about is try not to use 10 words when 3 will do. Don't try and use long descriptive passages when you could get the same job done in a shorter amount of time. So if you look at the example sentence that I gave you, it says, Ben, a tall and lean 14-year-old boy, ran very quickly after his very happy puppy. Now, a better way to say this would be, Ben, a wiry teenager, bolted after his jubilant puppy. And you can see that wiry and teenager replace whatever it is, 6 words. Ran very quickly instead of bolted, and very happy puppy instead of jubilant puppy. Those just take up more space than you really need to. So if you can cut down and use fewer words to get the same emotion and the same idea, you should try to always do that. So this means trying to avoid overusing modifiers. Now, modifiers are words like very, really, pretty, rather, etc., that you use to say, oh, he ran very fast, he was very happy. Try instead to use more accurate and descriptive words. So instead of saying very nervous, say someone is agitated. Instead of saying he was really sad, say that he was heartbroken. You know, these words are much more powerful, and they give your reader a much better sense of just how emotional your character is in that moment. Another writing tip, don't overuse adjectives. Let nouns and verbs drive your story whenever possible. You know, don't get too caught up in giving unnecessary descriptions. So if you were to say, The gray, coarse fabric of my sweater left an uncomfortable, itchy feeling on my neck. A better way of saying this would be, the coarse fabric of my sweater left an itchy feeling on my neck. All you've done is taken out a couple of the adjectives you used, but the same idea is coming through. You don't need to tell your reader what color the fabric of the sweater is. If the character has an itchy feeling on their neck, then obviously it's going to be uncomfortable. So you don't need to use both of those. So when you're using adjectives, choose them carefully and try not to overdo it. Now, another example would be if you said, she closed the door quickly, biting into a juicy red apple. A better way of saying this would be, she slammed the door, biting into an apple. Slammed gives a much better picture to your reader than closed the door quickly, and outside of a couple exceptions maybe, most apples are going to be juicy, so you don't really need to tell your reader that the apple she's biting into is juicy. It's just not necessary. Another writing tip, be clear on which characters are completing an action. Do not overuse pronouns. Pronouns being he, she, they, a word that takes the place of a noun. So in this example, it says, Paul was warming up before the game when John walked over. He was bouncing a ball in his right hand. He seemed nervous about the game. Your reader, and if you go through the sentence, you'll realize your reader has no idea which character is bouncing the ball or who seemed nervous. So the author should have used John or Paul's name to show which character was completing each action. So when you're writing your story, whenever there's doubt, use a character's name instead of a pronoun, just so it's always clear to your reader which character is performing which action. Also try to mix up how you give description. Try not to just list qualities of a character setting, because this can be, again, boring for a reader when you're just spending way too much time talking about a character or a scene when you can do it a different way. So if you read the example I came up with, it says, the castle was dark and made out of heavy stone. There were candles sitting on the main table and tapestries lining the walls next to the library. Jim walked into the castle. Jim had brown hair and green eyes, and he was nearly 6'5". Jim was excited. Now, this paragraph is almost all description, and there's no action really occurring. And there's a way that you can give the same information, but propel the action forward at the same time. So a better example would be, Jim walked into the castle. He ran a hand through his brown hair and picked up a candelabra to illuminate the darkness. Look at all these tapestries, he muttered, a glint in his green eyes. Jim ducked beneath the low door frame as he entered the library. So in the second paragraph, I cover the same information, Jim's eye color, his hair color, the fact that the castle is dark, there are tapestries on the wall, that he's tall, but I didn't have to just list all of those descriptors in a row. There's still something going on as I'm giving this description. So again, when you're writing, try to mix up how you give descriptions. Don't just list it out. Try and sort of intersperse it as you're giving action as well. Now, one last note, because I know that we've gone through a lot of rules. In the end, I always want you to allow your own writing style to shine through. These tips are just meant to help you along the way, to help make your writing as crisp and effective as possible, but I always want you to keep your own style in mind. Most authors break rules of the English language from time to time because they make sure that they bring their own voice into a story. This is what I want your stories to do. I want you to be creative. I want you to write in a way that is purely you. So keep the things that were in this video in mind, but at the same time also just try to always be yourself and tell your story the way that you want to tell it. So I hope this video has been very helpful. I'm looking forward to reading some excellent short stories. And until next time, this has been Professor Blazek signing off.